What's up, everyone? In this video we got another true crime video. I love my true crime, and I especially love these type of cases. DNA on Pantyhose solves murder after 32 years. There's criminals being caught for murders that were committed 40, 50 years ago because of DNA. I've said it once and I'll say it again. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. I'll say it to the day I die. Anyone who's ever committed a murder, DNA is going to catch you. DNA is going to catch you. It's going to get you. It's going to get you. It's going to get ya. Can you imagine killing someone and finding out that DNA exists, this new thing called DNA? They're solving murders. People have killed someone. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, did I leave any DNA behind when I killed that woman? Oh my gosh. I love it. I hope you're scared. I hope you're panicking. Or it's not just murders, rape. DNA is gonna get you. DNA is gonna get you. Let's get to this.
On March 21st, Don Bennett responds to a call about the body of a young woman lying on top of a grave. The woman has been shot twice in the head.
Grave?
Her face was bloody. Blood had run down the left side of her face and had dried. Beside the blood, dried blood on her face, it was very obvious there was a silk stocking tied very tightly around her neck, like a garrote that she'd probably been strangled with. The fact that her garments were pulled up, exposing her genitalia, would tell you that maybe there might have been an attempt at assault or rape. We didn't know at the time.
Next to the body lies a suitcase and a jumble of women's clothes.
She just obviously did not just walk in here. She was carried and put in here. Then everything she had with her was obviously put beside her.
Was she running away?
Covered up and left that way.
She running away?
Bennett goes with the body to the morgue. No semen or other evidence of sexual assault is found. The victim is identified as Jane Mixer, a University of Michigan law student, reported missing the day before.
Michigan.
In 1969, murder in Ann Arbor was a rather common commodity.
Oh, this is from Michigan.
With Jane Mixer, the third young woman found dead near the university.
Although she was shot, she still had the pantyhose wrapped around her neck.
Yeah, why?
So of course that was what happened to the prior one. So of course that would sort of lead you to believe it was the same person.
By midsummer, the death toll stood at 7. Speculation aside, the only thing they know for sure, the investigation is fresh out of leaves.
This is a serial killer?
Jane Mixer's murder goes cold, is packed away in the archives of the Michigan State Police, and largely forgotten until 30 years later, when the science of DNA resurrects the case.
I don't know if I've said this before, but I had a great uncle back in 1988 when I was 8. Someone broke in the back kitchen door while he was watching TV and stabbed him 47 times. And it's still unsolved to this day. And I know there has to be DNA. There has to be. Just
and raises more questions than answers.
This envelope contains the pantyhose that were on Jane Mixer's body at the time she was found.
The victim's pantyhose are of special interest to Schroeder.
Did the
felt quite strong
killer
that the offender's DNA could have been embedded
try to kill her with a pantyhose but couldn't, so he just ended up shooting her?
Schroeder packs up the pantyhose along with several other items and sends them to the state crime lab in Lansing.
We'll use this light source in order to scan
Not that
the
far
item of
from where I
evidence
live.
and see if anything stands out against the background. There were 4 areas on the nylon pantyhose from Jane Mixer. Visibly, you could see that there was a stain present in the mesh.
Stop juicing. Green juices, detox juices, starving yourself. All of those are now a thing of the past.
Of the nylon.
Milligan believes the stains to be sweat or mucus, most likely sloughed off the killer's hands as he carried Mixer's body. Milligan isolates the stains and extracts human DNA.
3 of the stains gave a full profile. They were the same profile, so they had the same types. They indicated the presence of a male donor.
Milligan then turns to a second piece of evidence, a spot of blood found on Jane Mixer's hand. Detectives assumed the blood belonged to the victim. DNA testing, however, yields an unexpected result, a second male profile.
There was no information other than we had 2 distinct
There were 2
profiles
men?
of 2 different male donors associated with the items of evidence that came from Jane Mixer.
In
I was just
November of
thinking
2002,
there
the
was
2
one.
profiles are loaded into the National DNA Database and run against millions of violent offenders. A year later, one of them hits.
I got a 911 page from the lab. So I called down to the lab to find out what was going on.
The blood found on Jane Mixer's hand in 1969 has been matched to John David Rulis, the man doing time for murdering his own mother.
We thought,
Oh,
this is
he looks like a
outstanding.
creep.
We've got someone who's in prison for a violent crime.
No remorse.
So, we got all excited about that for about 20 seconds.
The excitement fades when Schroeder learns that John David Rulis was born in 1964.
It's obvious pretty quick that he was only 4 years old and 8 months at the time Jane Mixer was murdered.
So,
surprised would be
it has to be
I think.
a brother
The Mixer case remains a
or
mystery
a
until
dad.
8 months later, when Detective Schroeder takes a second call from the DNA lab and identifies another suspect.
I don't know that we ever actually sat down and said, this is the guy and this is the day. This was just an opportunity for us to talk. I mean, it was a logical next step. We got to talk to the person who deposited the DNA.
Gary Leiterman is front and center in a 35-year-old cold case. Cold case detectives don't want to talk about Leiterman's neighbors. They want to know how his DNA wound up on the pantyhose of a murdered co-ed named Jane Mixer.
I may have met this person in a chance encounter, but I don't remember her specifically. I don't remember the face. I can remember having, on 1 or 2 occasions, a sexual encounter with women that I met at bars.
My biggest thought at that point is Jane Mixer wasn't at a bar. She wasn't out for the night bar hopping. I mean, she had a suitcase full of clothes. She had clothes on a hanger. She was going home to tell her family about her engagement to her fiance.
The DNA, where it's at, how it is, directly puts you there. You didn't meet her in a bar.
I have nothing to do with this girl and her
DNA
being
doesn't
killed
lie.
and left here. I have nothing to do with that.
We're basically accusing this man of murdering a 22-year-old girl. We didn't get any type of the normal response that you would expect to see from someone who's being accused of a crime of that nature.
Well, you haven't told us how your DNA got there. For some reason, you don't want to talk to us about what occurred.
What this interview did for us was tell us that there is no innocent explanation for his DNA to be on there. And I feel like we've covered every base we could in this interview.
Do what you have to do.
Gary Leiterman is arrested and charged with first-degree murder. As the stick
He was trying to think of what are some ways I could say that I'm connected to this girl. How my DNA got on her. What are some ways? I meet women at bars. I used to meet women at bars all the time.
State prepares for trial, however, problems arise.
It was certainly frustrating. I mean, we would have liked to have been able to present evidence to the jury to say, here's why John Rulis's blood was on Jane Mixer.
He killed
Although
himself?
Rulis was 4 years old at the time Jane Mixer was murdered, DNA testing shows a drop of his blood was found on the victim's hand.
Well, it was something that needed to be explained. It was something that needed to be investigated to find out if there was a problem.
Yeah,
That was
I mean,
the responsible thing to do.
a 4-year-old's
The
blood.
first possibility, lab contamination. Hiller huddles with his forensic team.
We were pretty defensive, I would say. We are so cautious on how we process everything in the laboratory.
Jeff Nye learns that evidence from Rulis's own murder case was in the crime lab during the same month that Mixer's evidence was processed. On the surface, anyway, the potential for contamination seems to grow.
I was asked to investigate the two cases together to determine if there was any crossing of paths between the two cases in the laboratory. So basically what I would do is come to the file room and grab all the files associated with
There
each
had
case.
to be contamination.
The two cases were processed by different analysts
A
at different
4-year-old
workstations, nearly a
blood
month
on
apart,
the victim.
making cross-contamination, in the state's opinion, highly unlikely.
They're stored on the opposite sides of the property room, and all the evidence that comes in the laboratory are sealed, so there's no issue there on the fact that they came unsealed and DNA just magically crossed from one side of the room to the other.
I have never seen a case that has so much reasonable doubt.
After 2 weeks of testimony, the case
Defense
goes to
attorney.
the jury, which deliberates for 5 hours,
A
then
defense
finds
attorney.
Leiterman guilty of murder in the first degree. Steve Keston served on the jury.
The main point of disagreement was how to handle the John Rulis blood drought, if it was his.
Despite the DNA report, Keston never believed the stain belonged to Rulis.
I personally don't think so. I think that that was Jane Mixer's blood. My personal opinion is that there may have been a mix-up in the lab, and that's how that drop of blood was associated with John Rulis.
Gary Leiterman is sentenced to a term of life without parole. No explanation, however, has ever surfaced as to how or why John Rulis's blood made its way into the Mixer crime scene.
What? So there, that just that one guy who is rightfully sent to prison for the rest of his life. I mean, he looked like he was in his probably 60s, mid to late 60s, maybe early 70s. I don't know. But they never found a reasoning why this 4-year-old blood was found on the victim. And now, years later, that guy is in prison for murdering his mother. It's not like it's just any 4-year-old's blood. It was a 4-year-old's blood who went on to become a murderer, a sick murderer, killing his own mother. So there's no explanation ever given to why that person's blood, that guy's blood was found on her, I think it was show on her wrist. The one guy at the end said, I think it was just actually the victim's blood or something. I don't know. Maybe it was, or maybe a second man got away with murder. I don't know. Just at least someone was arrested. DNA is gonna get you. Peace, everyone.